The manila envelope sat innocuously on my kitchen counter, mixed in with the usual bills and advertisements that Thursday morning. I almost threw it away with the junk mail, but something about the official seal from the Department of Vital Records made me pause. My hands trembled slightly as I tore it open, expecting perhaps a delayed birth certificate for our upcoming European vacation or some bureaucratic mix-up that needed correction. Instead, I found my own death certificate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The black ink was stark against the cream-colored paper, every detail meticulously filled out. Sarah Elizabeth Morgan, age 34, cause of death, automobile accident, date of death, March 15, 3 months ago. I stared at the document, my coffee growing cold as my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. The signature at the bottom belonged to Dr. Michael Harrison, and the informant was listed as Marcus Morgan, husband. Marcus. My husband of 7 years. The man who had kissed me goodbye that very morning and told me he'd be working late again. My legs gave out, and I collapsed into the kitchen chair, the death certificate fluttering to the floor. This had to be some kind of mistake, some clerical error that would be easily explained. But as I picked up the paper with shaking hands, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The handwriting in the corner, a small notation that read, "Insurance claim processed, $2.3 million. I grabbed my phone and called the Department of Vital Records, my voice barely steady enough to speak. The woman on the other end was sympathetic but firm. The certificate was legitimate, filed by my husband 3 months ago, and yes, there had been a substantial life insurance payout processed based on this documentation. But I'm alive, I whispered into the phone, feeling absurd for having to state the obvious. Ma'am, I understand this is distressing, but our records show. I hung up and immediately called Marcus's office. His secretary, Janet, answered with her usual cheerful tone. Hi Janet, it's Sarah. Is Marcus available? There was a pause, then an uncomfortable clearing of her throat. I'm sorry, who is this? Sarah. Sarah Morgan. Marcus's wife. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Janet spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Morgan, I think there's been some mistake. Mr. Morgan's wife passed away in March. He remarried last month to a lovely woman named Victoria. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the kitchen floor. Through the fog of shock, I could hear Janet's concerned voice asking if I was still there, but I couldn't form words. The room seemed to spin as pieces of a horrific puzzle began clicking into place. Marcus's late nights at the office. His distant behavior over the past few months. The way he'd been encouraging me to take long trips to visit my sister in Portland. The new life insurance policy he'd insisted we upgrade for our future security. I crawled across the floor to retrieve my phone, my hands shaking so violently I could barely operate the screen. A quick search of Marcus's name brought up results that made me physically sick. Wedding announcements from 2 weeks ago featuring Marcus Morgan and Victoria Sterling, a stunning blonde who couldn't have been more than 25. The article gushed about their whirlwind romance, following Marcus's tragic loss of his first wife. There were photos of them at charity galas, art gallery openings, expensive restaurants, all places Marcus had told me he was too busy with work to attend. In every picture, Victoria wore jewelry I didn't recognize, designer dresses that cost more than my car, and a radiant smile of a woman who had no idea she'd married a man who had murdered his previous wife on paper. I scrolled through more photos, each one a knife twist in my chest. There was Marcus, the man I'd shared a bed with for 7 years, looking happier than I'd ever seen him. Victoria's Instagram account was public, filled with romantic posts about their destined love and gratitude for Marcus, helping her heal from her own tragic past. My laptop was still open on the kitchen table from where I'd been paying bills that morning. With trembling fingers, I logged into our joint bank accounts, though I already suspected what I'd find. The accounts were empty, not just empty, but closed. According to the bank's records, Marcus had provided my death certificate and legal documentation naming him as sole beneficiary 3 months ago. Our savings, our investments, even the small inheritance from my grandmother, all of it was gone. Worse, the house we'd lived in together for 5 years was no longer in my name. The deed showed it had been transferred to Marcus 2 weeks after my alleged death, and then sold to Victoria Sterling for significantly below market value. I was legally dead, financially erased, and completely alone. The sound of a car door slamming in our driveway, no, their driveway now, made me freeze. Through the kitchen window, I watched Marcus's BMW pull up, but he wasn't alone. A woman with platinum blonde hair stepped out of the passenger seat, laughing at something he'd said. Victoria Sterling. His new wife. I ducked below the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. They were coming to the house that was no longer mine, where I was now technically trespassing. I could hear Marcus's voice getting closer, keys jangling as he approached the front door. The lawyer said all her personal items should still be in storage in the garage, he was saying. We can have them donated this weekend. Start fresh, you know? You're so thoughtful, darling. Victoria's voice was honey-sweet with a slight southern accent. I know how difficult this must be for you, dealing with her things. Her things. They were talking about my possessions as if I were actually dead, as if the life I'd built here had been nothing more than clutter to be cleared away. I watched through the window as Marcus unlocked the front door, locks that had apparently been changed since my key no longer worked, and gestured for Victoria to enter. After you, Mrs. Morgan, he said, and the sound of him calling another woman by my name nearly made me scream. I had to get out before they discovered me, but first I needed evidence. Moving as quietly as possible, I used my phone to photograph everything: the death certificate, the bank statements, the property transfer documents, even screenshots of Victoria's social media posts. If I was going to fight this nightmare, I needed proof of what had been done to me. The sound of footsteps moving through the house spurred me into action. I grabbed my purse, the documents, and slipped out the back door, carefully closing it behind me. My car was parked 2 blocks away where I'd left it that morning when I decided to walk home from the coffee shop, a decision that had probably saved me from a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. As I drove aimlessly through neighborhoods that had once felt like home, my mind raced through the implications of what I'd discovered. Marcus hadn't just stolen my money and married another woman, he'd made me a ghost, a legal nonentity with no right to exist. Every official record showed that Sarah Morgan had died 3 months ago. My social security number, my driver's license, my credit cards, all of it would be flagged as belonging to a deceased person. I couldn't go to the police, because how do you report a crime when you're legally dead? I couldn't access my money because I didn't exist. I couldn't even check into a hotel without valid identification that wouldn't trigger alerts in the system. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake: he hadn't actually killed me. As the sun began to set, I found myself parked outside the offices of Walsh and Associates, the law firm that had handled our estate planning. The building was closed, but I sat there anyway, watching the empty windows and formulating a plan. Tomorrow, I would begin the seemingly impossible task of proving I was alive while navigating a system that insisted I was dead. My phone buzzed with a text message, and my heart stopped when I saw Marcus's name on the screen. Working late again. Tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. He was texting his dead wife while his new wife was probably unpacking her belongings in what used to be our bedroom. The sheer audacity of maintaining the charade even now suggested a level of planning and calculation that made my skin crawl. I typed back, "Love you too," because I needed him to think everything was normal while I figured out my next move. Point 3. More messages appeared in quick succession. Thought I saw someone at the house today. Probably just the cleaning service. Victoria says hi. She's excited to meet you soon. By the way, found some old paperwork that needs shredding. We'll handle it this weekend. The cleaning service. He was covering for the fact that someone, me, had been in the house. And old paperwork that needed shredding could only mean evidence of his fraud. Victoria saying hi to his supposedly dead wife was either incredibly twisted humor or a sign that she was completely unaware of the truth. As darkness fell, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to run, hide, or quietly accept what had been done to me. Marcus had declared me dead, but he was about to discover that some ghosts don't rest peacefully. I started the car and drove toward the city center, toward resources I knew existed for people in impossible situations. If Marcus wanted to play games with legal documents and false identities, I would learn to play better. After all, being legally dead came with certain advantages, like the fact that a dead woman couldn't be held responsible for what she might do to reclaim her life. The first step would be finding someone who could help me navigate the complex process of resurrection, not in the supernatural sense, but in the bureaucratic one. I needed allies, legal advice, and most importantly, I needed to understand exactly how Marcus had pulled off this elaborate deception. As I drove through the night, I began to see the situation differently. Yes, I'd lost everything, but I'd also gained something invaluable: knowledge of exactly who my husband really was, and evidence of crimes that would destroy him if properly exposed. The man who thought he'd erased me from existence was about to learn that dead women tell the most devastating tales. Tomorrow would begin my journey back from the dead, and Marcus Morgan was going to regret every single decision that had brought us to this moment. But first, I needed to survive the night as a woman who didn't exist, in a world that no longer had a place for her. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, knowing that I had hours of planning ahead of me before I could take the first step toward reclaiming my life. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I spread the documents across a corner booth, studying every detail of my own death certificate as if it were a battle plan, because that's exactly what it was going to become. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's Diner cast harsh shadows across the documents spread before me as I nursed my third cup of coffee. It was nearly 2 a.m., and the night shift waitress had stopped asking if I needed anything else, apparently recognizing the look of someone whose world had imploded in the span of a single afternoon. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Marcus, each voicemail growing progressively more concerned about where his beloved wife had disappeared to. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so terrifying. I listened to the last one through my earbuds, his voice dripping with false worry. "Sarah, honey, I'm getting really concerned. Your car isn't in the driveway and you're not answering. Please call me back. Victoria's worried too, she was looking forward to meeting you tomorrow." Victoria was worried about meeting a dead woman. Either she was completely in the dark about Marcus's scheme, or she was an Academy Award-worthy actress playing the role of concerned new stepmother. The thought that she might be innocent in all this made my stomach churn, another victim of Marcus's manipulation. Just like me. I needed help, but traditional channels were impossible. Police would run my ID and discover I was deceased. Lawyers would require proof of identity I couldn't provide. Banks would freeze any accounts the moment my social security number triggered fraud alerts. I was trapped in a bureaucratic purgatory of my husband's making. That's when I remembered Elena Vasquez. Elena had been my roommate in college, and she'd always walked on the shadier side of legal. After graduation, she disappeared into what she vaguely called advocacy work for people in complicated situations. I'd always suspected it was more than that, but I'd never asked questions. Now, I wished I'd paid more attention. Finding her wasn't easy. Elena didn't maintain traditional social media accounts or have a business listing. But I remembered she had a weakness for vintage jazz clubs, and after checking the websites of 3 downtown venues, I found what I was looking for. Vasquez was scheduled to perform piano at the Blue Note every Thursday night. The Blue Note sat in the basement of a converted warehouse, accessible only through an unmarked door in an alley most people wouldn't venture down after dark. The bouncer looked me up and down suspiciously but didn't ask for ID when I mentioned I was there to see Elena's set. The club was dimly lit and half empty, filled with the kind of people who preferred to conduct their business away from prying eyes. Elena sat at a baby grand piano in the corner, her dark hair longer than I remembered but her face unmistakable. She was playing a haunting rendition of Strange Fruit, her fingers dancing across the keys with the same precision I remembered from our dorm room study sessions. I waited until her set ended before approaching. Elena looked up from gathering her sheet music and froze, her eyes widening in recognition. "Sarah Morgan," she said slowly, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I replied, sliding into the booth across from her. "I am a ghost." Elena's expression shifted from surprise to professional interest. She flagged down a waitress and ordered 2 drinks without asking what I wanted. Vodka neat, the same thing we'd drunk during late-night cramming sessions senior year. "Tell me everything," she said simply. I pulled out my phone and showed her. The death certificate, the bank statements, the property transfers. Elena examined each document with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen similar situations before. Her face remained impassive, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes that meant she was calculating angles. "How long have you been married to this Marcus?" she asked, returning my phone. 7 years. I thought I knew him. You never know anyone completely, Elena said, downing her vodka in one smooth motion. Especially not someone capable of this level of premeditation. This isn't a crime of passion, Sarah. This is systematic erasure. She leaned forward, lowering her voice even though the nearest patron was 3 tables away. The good news is that being legally dead gives you certain advantages. No one's looking for you, monitoring your movements, or tracking your activities. You're invisible. That doesn't feel like good news. It will when you understand what we're dealing with. Elena pulled out a tablet and began typing with swift efficiency. Marcus didn't do this alone. Creating false death certificates, processing insurance claims, transferring property, that requires inside help. Medical professionals, clerks at Vital Records, someone at the insurance company, probably a lawyer. The screen showed a web of connections Elena was mapping out as she spoke. This is organized fraud, which means there are other victims. Your husband has done this before, or he's part of a larger operation. My blood ran cold. You think Victoria is in danger? If she's innocent, absolutely. If she's complicit, Elena shrugged. Then she's a problem we'll deal with later. Elena closed the tablet and studied my face in the dim light. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I can help you disappear completely, new identity, clean papers, fresh start somewhere Marcus will never find you. Or we can fight back, but that's going to be dangerous and expensive. I want my life back. That might not be possible. Even if we expose Marcus, the legal process of proving you're alive could take years. In the meantime, you'll be in limbo. I thought about the house I'd loved, the garden I'd planted, the life I'd built brick by brick only to watch it stolen in a single afternoon. Then I want him destroyed. Elena smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. Now we're talking. But it's going to require patience, planning, and probably breaking several laws. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever it takes. Good. Elena signaled for another round. First, we need to establish your base of operations. You can't use hotels, rental cars, or anything requiring official ID. I have a safe house you can use, but it comes with rules. No contact with anyone from your old life, no social media, no credit cards. Cash only. She slid a business card across the table, blank except for a phone number. Memorize this and destroy the card. If you need anything, call from a burner. Phone and say you're looking for apartment rentals. Someone will get back to you within 6 hours. What about Marcus? He's going to report me missing eventually. Let him. Missing person reports require proof that someone existed in the first place. Officially, Sarah Morgan died 3 months ago. Any missing person report would be dismissed as a clerical error or elaborate hoax. Elena leaned back, studying me with calculating eyes. There's something else you need to understand. Once we start down this path, there's no backing out. We're going to gather evidence, build a case, and when the time is right, we're going to burn Marcus's world to the ground. But it might take months, maybe longer. I have time. Apparently, I have nothing but time. You have more than time. Elena corrected. You have the element of surprise. Marcus thinks he's won. He's gotten away with the perfect crime and moved on with his new life. People like that get careless eventually. She stood up, gathering her things. Give me 48 hours to make some calls and set things up. In the meantime, stay mobile. Don't go back to any places you frequented as Sarah Morgan. Don't contact any mutual friends. As far as the world is concerned, you're a stranger who happens to look like a dead woman. Elena paused at the edge of the booth. One more thing, from now on, you're not Sarah Morgan. Sarah died 3 months ago, remember? You need a new name, even temporarily. I thought for a moment. My grandmother's maiden name had been Chen, and my middle name was Elizabeth. Beth Chen, I said finally. Beth Chen it is. Elena smiled grimly. Welcome to the underground, Beth. Try not to get killed. Before we can kill them. After Elena left, I sat alone in the club for another hour, watching the last patrons filter out into the night. The weight of my new reality was settling in. I was no longer Sarah Morgan, loving wife and graphic designer. I was Beth Chen, a ghost seeking vengeance against the man who'd erased her. The safe house Elena had arranged was a studio apartment above a laundromat in a neighborhood where no one asked questions. The building manager, an elderly Korean woman named Mrs. Park, handed me keys without requesting ID or deposit. Apparently, Elena's word was sufficient. The apartment was spartanly furnished but clean: a bed, a small table, 2 chairs, and a kitchenette. That looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. There was no internet, no cable, nothing that could be traced back to me. A landline phone sat on the table with a note taped to it, for emergencies only. I spent my first night as a dead woman lying awake on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the laundromat below. The industrial washers and dryers never seemed to stop, creating a constant rhythmic backdrop to my racing thoughts. By morning, I'd made a decision: if I was going to be dead, I was going to be the most dangerous kind of dead, the kind that came back to haunt. I walked 6 blocks to a convenience store and bought a burner phone with cash, then found a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi. Using a fake email account I created on the spot, I began researching Marcus's new life with the methodical precision of a private investigator. Victoria Sterling turned out to be more interesting than her Instagram suggested. She was a divorce attorney specializing in high-asset cases, which meant she understood exactly how valuable Marcus's apparent wealth would be. Her law firm's website showed she'd only been practicing for 3 years, but she'd already made partner, unusually fast advancement that suggested either exceptional talent or exceptional connections. More intriguingly, Victoria had been married before. Her previous husband, Robert Sterling, had died in a boating accident 2 years ago, leaving her a substantial inheritance. The obituary made him sound like a saint, but when I dug deeper, I found hints of a different story. A sealed court case involving domestic violence allegations. A restraining order that had been mysteriously dropped. A pattern that looked disturbingly familiar. Either Victoria had terrible luck with husbands, or she was a player in Marcus's game rather than another victim. My burner phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number: apartment viewing available. 3 p.m. Pier 47. Elena was ready to make contact. Pier 47 was mostly abandoned, a relic from the city's industrial past that now served as an unofficial meeting place for people conducting business they preferred to keep private. Elena stood at the end of the pier, dressed in jeans and a hoodie that made her look like any other jogger taking a break. "Learn anything interesting about the new Mrs. Morgan?" she asked without preamble. I told her about Victoria's background. The suspicious death of her first husband, the rapid career advancement. Elena listened without interruption, occasionally nodding. "I had my people run some preliminary checks," Elena said when I finished. "Victoria Sterling is clean on paper: no criminal record, no suspicious financial activity, excellent credit score. But her first husband's death has some interesting parallels to your situation." She handed me a manila folder. Robert Sterling increased his life insurance policy 6 months before his death. The boat accident happened during a solo fishing trip, no witnesses. Victoria inherited everything, including his successful construction company. So she's done this before. Or she's incredibly unlucky. Either way, it means Marcus isn't working alone. They're a team. Elena pulled out her tablet and showed me a surveillance photo: Marcus and Victoria entering a building I didn't recognize. This was taken yesterday. They're meeting with someone named David Park, a private investigator with a very flexible relationship with the law. What kind of investigator? The kind who specializes in making problems disappear. Missing persons? Inconvenient witnesses, paper trails that lead to uncomfortable questions. Elena's expression was grim. If they're consulting with Park, it means they're planning their next move. A chill ran down my spine. Next move? They already got what they wanted from me. Sarah Morgan is dead, but Beth Chen isn't. If someone starts asking questions about Sarah's death, insurance investigators, suspicious family members, nosy friends, they need to be prepared to eliminate loose ends. The implication hung in the air between us. Marcus and Victoria weren't just thieves, they were potential killers preparing to clean up after their crime. What do we do? Elena closed the tablet and looked out over the water. We beat them at their own game. But first, we need to understand exactly how deep this goes. I have a contact at the insurance company who can tell us about other suspicious claims. If Marcus and Victoria are running a serial operation, there will be patterns. She turned back to me, her expression deadly serious. In the meantime, you need to stay invisible and stay alive. Because if they realize Sarah Morgan's death certificate was premature, they'll make sure the next one is permanent. As we parted ways, Elena handed me a small device that looked like a garage door opener. Panic button, she explained. If you're in immediate danger, press it. Help will come, but it's a one-time use only. Walking back through the city streets, I felt the weight of the device in my pocket like a talisman. For the first time since discovering my death certificate, I felt like I had allies, resources, and most importantly, a plan. Marcus and Victoria thought they'd committed the perfect crime, but they'd made one crucial error: they'd underestimated their victim. Sarah Morgan might be dead, but Beth Chen was just getting started. That evening, I sat in my safe house apartment, surrounded by documents and photos, planning the resurrection of a dead woman and the destruction of those who'd killed her. The sound of the laundromat below provided a steady rhythm to my thoughts, like a heartbeat in the darkness. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. 3 days into my new existence as Beth Chen, Elena's contact at Meridian Life Insurance delivered information that changed everything. The manila envelope slid under my apartment door at precisely 6 a.m., containing photocopies that painted a picture far more sinister than I'd imagined. Marcus and Victoria weren't just opportunistic killers, they were running a sophisticated operation that had been claiming victims for over 5 years. The insurance documents showed a pattern of suspicious deaths, each following the same blueprint: recent policy upgrades, accidental deaths with no witnesses, and claims processed with unusual speed. Rebecca Chen, 29, drowned during a solo kayaking trip. Her husband remarried within 2 months. Michael Torres, 41, died in a hiking accident. His wife's grief was assuaged by a new relationship that began suspiciously quickly after his funeral. Jennifer Walsh, 33, perished in a house fire while her husband was conveniently out of town on business. 8 victims in total, each death netting between $1 and $3 million in insurance payouts. The surviving spouses had all disappeared from public records within a year of collecting their windfalls, leaving behind shell companies and forwarding addresses that led nowhere. But there was something else in the file that made my hands shake: a 9th name on the list. Victoria Sterling's first husband, Robert, had indeed died in that boating accident. But according to these documents, Victoria hadn't been his wife, she'd been his insurance beneficiary through a company called Sterling Consulting, which had purchased his policy just 6 months before his death. My burner phone rang, Elena's voice cutting through my spiraling thoughts. "Did you review the package?" "They're serial killers," I whispered, still staring at the photos of smiling couples who had no idea one of them was planning the other's murder. "Serial insurance fraudsters," Elena corrected. "The killing comes second to the money. Meet me at the old textile warehouse on Brennan Street in 2 hours. We need to move fast." The warehouse was a monument to industrial decay, its broken windows like dead eyes staring out over the abandoned district. Elena was waiting in the shadows near a side entrance, but she wasn't alone. A man with prematurely gray hair and tired eyes stood beside her, holding a briefcase that looked like it had seen better decades. "Beth, meet Detective Ray Morrison, retired," Elena said by way of introduction. "Ray, this is our problem." Morrison studied my face with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading lies and secrets. "Elena showed me your documentation. This is way beyond simple fraud. We're looking at organized crime with multiple jurisdictions involved. Can you help?" "Me?" I asked. "Officially? No. I'm retired, and you're legally dead." Morrison opened his briefcase, revealing stacks of police reports and case files. "Unofficially? I've been tracking similar patterns for 3 years. Your husband and his partner are part of a network that spans at least 4 states." He spread photos across a makeshift table, surveillance shots of Marcus and Victoria meeting with various individuals in restaurants, office buildings, and parking garages. "The operation is sophisticated. They recruit through dating apps and high-end social events, targeting recently divorced or widowed individuals with substantial assets." "How do they choose their victims?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Isolated people with few close family ties, Morrison replied. Recent transplants to new cities, individuals estranged from relatives, professionals who travel frequently. People whose disappearance wouldn't immediately trigger widespread searches. Elena pulled out her tablet, showing me a detailed organizational chart. We've identified at least 12 active operators across the network. Marcus and Victoria appear to be mid-level players, not the masterminds. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You're saying there are others like me? People who think they're happily married while their spouses plan their murders. We've identified 3 potential current targets, Morrison confirmed grimly. All in various stages of the grooming process. Policy upgrades, isolation from support networks, establishing alibis for upcoming accidents. I sank onto a crate, overwhelmed by the scope of what we'd uncovered. What about the police? The FBI? Shouldn't they be handling this? Morrison's laugh was bitter. I tried for 2 years to get my department interested. Problem is, the deaths all look legitimate on the surface. Different jurisdictions, different methods, different insurance companies. No one agency sees the full picture. Plus, Elena added, some of the operators have connections in law enforcement. Information has a way of disappearing or getting buried under bureaucratic red tape. Morrison pulled out a newer-looking file. That's why we're handling this privately. Elena's network has resources that official channels lack. What kind of resources? Elena's smile was sharp. The kind that don't require warrants or probable cause. We can go places and access information that police can't. She opened the file Morrison had indicated, revealing detailed financial records I recognized as Marcus's banking information. For example, we know that Marcus moved $2.3 million through 3 different offshore accounts in the past week. He's preparing to disappear. Which means they're getting ready to eliminate loose ends, Morrison added darkly. My blood ran cold. The current targets are in immediate danger, yes. Elena was already typing on her tablet. Which is why we're accelerating our timeline. We can't wait months to build the perfect case. People will die. Morrison stood up, gathering his files. I'm going to reach out to a contact at the Financial Crimes Commission. Someone I trust who might be able to freeze Marcus's assets without tipping him off. What do I do? I asked. Elena looked up from her tablet. You're going to do something incredibly dangerous and probably illegal. You're going to break into Marcus and Victoria's house and plant surveillance equipment. The plan Elena outlined was audacious in its simplicity. While Marcus and Victoria attended a charity gala that evening, an event I knew about because Victoria had posted about it on Instagram, I would gain entry to their house and install hidden cameras and listening devices throughout the property. The security system is standard residential, Elena explained, handing me a small electronic device. This will loop the camera feeds for 30 minutes, giving you a window to get in and out undetected. What if they come home early? They won't. Victoria's posted about the after-party, and Marcus never misses an opportunity to network. Elena's confidence was reassuring, but I could feel my hands trembling. Besides, you'll have backup. The backup turned out to be a woman named Sophia who looked like she could bench press a motorcycle. She met me 3 blocks from the house, carrying a toolkit that would make a professional burglar envious. Elena says you used to live here, Sophia said without preamble. Know the layout? I nodded, though the thought of entering my former home as a trespasser made my stomach churn. Master bedroom upstairs, home office on the main floor, living room with vaulted ceilings. Perfect. We'll plant audio in the office and bedroom, video in the living room and kitchen. If they're planning something, they'll discuss it in one of those locations. We approached the house through the neighbor's yard, using hedges and shadows to stay invisible. The Tudor-style home I'd once loved now looked sinister in the moonlight, like a beautiful facade hiding something rotten underneath. Sophia made quick work of the security system, her fingers dancing over the electronic device Elena had provided. 30 minutes starting now, she whispered, entering through the back door I'd used thousands of times felt like stepping into a parallel universe. Everything looked the same but felt fundamentally different. Victoria's touches were evident, fresh flowers in vases, different artwork on the walls, family photos that showed her and Marcus as a happy couple. Focus, Sophia murmured, pulling me back to the task at hand. Emotions will get you caught. She was right. I forced myself to think of this as a mission rather than a return to my stolen life. We moved through the house with practiced efficiency, Sophia installing devices while I served as lookout and guide. In Marcus's office, I noticed something that made my blood boil. Framed on his desk was a photo of him and Victoria at what looked like a romantic dinner, but I recognized the restaurant. It was where Marcus had taken me for our 5th anniversary, while I was apparently already dead, according to his timeline. Found something interesting, Sophia called softly from the corner where she was installing a camera behind a bookshelf. Hidden safe behind the financial planning books. The safe was small but professional grade, requiring either a combination or biometric access. Can you open it? Not tonight, but I can install a vibration sensor. If they open it, we'll know when and how often. We finished with 3 minutes to spare, slipping out through the same door we'd entered. As we walked back through the neighbor's yard, I caught sight of lights in the distance, a car turning onto the street. Move, Sophia hissed, pulling me into the shadows behind a large oak tree. Marcus's BMW glided past, Victoria's laughter audible through the open windows. They were home early, probably having left the gala immediately after making their required appearances. If we'd been 5 minutes slower, they would have caught us. Close call, Sophia observed as we reached her car. But we got what we needed. Elena will have full audio and video feeds by tomorrow morning. Back at my safe house, I lay awake listening to the industrial sounds of the laundromat below, wondering what conversations those hidden devices would capture. For the first time since discovering my death certificate, I felt like we were taking concrete action rather than simply reacting to Marcus's moves. My burner phone buzzed with a text message, package delivered successfully. First harvest tomorrow. At noon. Elena's coded language meant the surveillance equipment was operational and we'd have our first recordings by midday. I tried to sleep, but every sound made me think of Marcus and Victoria, probably discussing their next victim while cameras recorded their every word. The next morning brought devastating news. Detective Morrison called Elena with an update that changed everything. One of the potential victims we'd identified, a woman named Jennifer Park, had been found dead in her apartment. Apparent suicide, according to the initial police report. Suicide? I asked when Elena relayed the information. But she was supposed to be their next target. She was their next target, Elena replied grimly. They must have realized she was getting suspicious or asking too many questions. Better to stage a suicide than risk an investigation into an accidental death. The reality hit me like a sledgehammer. We weren't just investigating past crimes. We were in an active situation where people were dying, and our investigation might have inadvertently triggered Jennifer's murder. There are 2 other potential victims, I said, remembering Morrison's files. We have to warn them. Warn them how? Elena challenged. That their loving spouses are planning to kill them for insurance money? They'll think we're crazy conspiracy theorists, and word will get back to the killers that someone's onto them. She was right, but that didn't make it easier to accept. Somewhere in the city, 2 people were going about their normal lives, unaware that the person they trusted most was planning their destruction. What about the surveillance footage from last night? Elena checked her tablet. First download is processing now. We should have audio and video within the hour. When the files came through, they were everything we'd hoped for and more. The audio quality was crystal clear, and Marcus and Victoria had indeed discussed business after returning from the gala. Jennifer was getting too curious about Robert's accident. Victoria's voice came through with chilling clarity. She hired a private investigator. So we handled it, Marcus replied. Made it look like guilt over her husband's death finally got to her. Tragic but believable. What about the Chen woman? Any word from Park? My blood froze. They were talking about me, or rather, about Beth Chen, my new identity. Park's still looking into it, Marcus answered. Someone matching Sarah's description was seen in the area where her car was supposed to be found. Could be nothing, but we can't take chances. If she's alive, Victoria's voice took on a dangerous edge. She won't be for long, Marcus interrupted. Park specializes in cleaning up messes. If there's a problem, he'll eliminate it permanently. Elena paused the recording, her face pale. They know you're alive. Not exactly, but they suspect something isn't right. How long do we have? Not long enough. Elena was already gathering her equipment. We need to move to phase 2 immediately. No more surveillance, no more building evidence. It's time to go on the offensive. She handed me a new burner phone and a set of keys I didn't recognize. Safe house number 2. This building is compromised now that they're actively looking for you. As I prepared to disappear again, deeper into Elena's underground network, I realized that the game had fundamentally changed. Marcus and Victoria were no longer passive targets of my investigation, they were actively hunting me. The dead woman they thought they'd buried was about to become their worst nightmare, but first, I had to stay alive long enough to destroy them. And with David Park, a professional killer, now searching for me, survival was no longer guaranteed. The war between the living and the legally dead had begun in earnest. The second safe house was a converted shipping container tucked behind a legitimate auto repair shop in the industrial district. Elena's network had more layers than I'd imagined. This place was completely off-grid, powered by solar panels and connected to the outside world only through encrypted satellite internet. David Park found your first location, Elena announced, setting a laptop on the metal table that served as both desk and dining surface. Sophia spotted him casing the building this morning. The surveillance photos showed a man in his 50s with dead eyes and surgical scars along his jawline. He moved like someone accustomed to violence, checking sight lines and escape routes with professional thoroughness. How did he find me so quickly? Facial recognition software, Elena replied, pulling up traffic camera footage. Park has access to municipal surveillance systems. He ran Sarah Morgan's photo through the database and got hits from 3 different cameras near your old safe house. The technology that was supposed to protect citizens had become a weapon against me. Every street corner, every ATM, every storefront security system was potentially feeding information to the people trying to kill me. So what now? Do I keep running forever? Elena's smile was predatory. Now we turn the tables. Park is good at hunting prey, but he's not used to prey that hunts back. She opened the laptop, revealing detailed blueprints and floor plans. Park operates out of a private investigation firm downtown. Officially, they handle insurance fraud and background checks. Unofficially, they're the cleanup crew for Marcus and Victoria's operation. You want me to break into a professional investigator's office? I want you to do more than break in. I want you to destroy them. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up financial records. Park's firm processes payments for the entire network. Bank routing numbers, shell company registrations, communication logs with operatives in 4 states, everything we need to bring down the whole organization. The plan was ambitious and terrifying. While Park was out hunting for me, I would infiltrate his office and download everything from his servers. But Elena had an additional objective that made my stomach clench. There's a current target we haven't discussed, she said, pulling up a social media profile. Amanda Reeves, 31, recently engaged to a man named Thomas Chen. I stared at the photos of a radiant young woman showing off her engagement ring. Amanda looked so happy, so trusting, exactly like I'd been 2 years ago when Marcus convinced me to upgrade our life insurance. Thomas Chen isn't his real name, Elena continued. He's actually Marcus's cousin, Daniel Frost. Family business? Apparently. The network was even more extensive than we'd realized. This wasn't just Marcus and Victoria, they had relatives, associates, an entire extended family involved in systematic murder. Amanda's engagement party is tomorrow night, Elena said, highlighting a calendar entry. Big celebration at the Riverside Country Club. Daniel will be there, along with several other network members we've identified. You want to crash an engagement party? I want to save Amanda's life and gather intelligence on the entire operation. Elena closed the laptop and stood up. But first, we deal with Park. The Park Investigations building was a converted brownstone. In the legal district, its brass nameplate polished and professional. At 3 a.m., the surrounding offices were dark, but security cameras monitored every entrance and exit. Elena had provided me with equipment that belonged in a spy thriller, Signal. Jammers, lockpicking tools, and a device that could clone security keycards from a distance. But the most important tool was information. Sophia had been monitoring Park's movements for 2 days and confirmed he was currently staking out a hotel across town, waiting for me to surface. 30 minutes maximum, Elena's voice crackled through my earpiece. Any longer and you risk running into their automated security protocols. The side entrance yielded to my cloned keycard, and I slipped into the building's darkened lobby. Park's office was on the third floor, accessible through a stairwell that avoided the main elevator cameras. The office itself was sterile and impersonal, dominated by banks of computer monitors and filing cabinets that suggested Park's business was more extensive than his public advertising suggested. But it was the wall of photographs that made my blood run cold. Dozens of faces stared back at me, men and women of various ages, each photo marked with dates and what looked like status codes. Some photos had red X's drawn across them. Others bore notation in a shorthand I didn't recognize but could guess the meaning of. These were targets, victims, and completed contracts. A rogues gallery of people whose only crime had been trusting the wrong person. Beth, you need to focus, Elena's voice reminded me through the earpiece. Download first, browse later. I forced myself to turn away from the photos and focus on Park's computer system. The device Elena had given me made quick work of his passwords, copying files faster than I could read their names, financial records, communication logs, surveillance reports, travel itineraries, terabytes of information that would hopefully contain enough evidence to bring down the entire network. But as the download progressed, I found myself drawn back to those photographs. One face made me stop breathing entirely. A young man with kind eyes and an uncertain smile, marked with yesterday's date and a notation that read, "Active surveillance, Marcus priority." I took a photo of the image with my phone, then continued searching. 3 filing cabinets were locked, but Elena's tools made short work of them. Inside, I found physical files corresponding to the digital photos, complete dossiers on dozens of individuals, including detailed plans for their elimination. Amanda Reeves' file was thick with surveillance photos, financial records, and what looked like a timeline for her systematic isolation and murder. According to Park's notes, Daniel had been cultivating their relationship for 8 months, slowly convincing Amanda to cut ties with friends and family who might ask inconvenient questions. Warning, motion detector activated on the 2nd floor. Elena's voice was tense. Someone's in the building. My hands shook as I grabbed Amanda's file and several others, stuffing them into the bag Elena had provided. The computer was still downloading, showing 73% complete, but footsteps were echoing in the stairwell. Can you get out through the window? I looked at the 3rd-story drop to the alley below. Not without breaking something important. Then you hide. Now. I powered down the computer, pocketed the download device, and squeezed into the narrow space between 2 filing cabinets just as the office door opened. Through the gap, I could see David Park enter with another man I didn't recognize. They moved with the casual confidence of people who owned the space, but there was tension in their voices. "The Chen woman is a problem," the stranger was saying. 3 different cameras picked her up in the warehouse district. "She's got help." "Professional help," Park agreed, checking his computer monitors. "Someone with serious resources and technical capabilities. Marcus wants her eliminated before the Reeves operation concludes. Can't afford any more attention from law enforcement." Park was examining his computer, frowning at the screen. "Someone's been accessing my system. Recent login, still active session." My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized I hadn't properly logged out. The download device in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Internal breach?" the stranger asked. "No. External intrusion, very sophisticated." Park's fingers flew over the keyboard, running diagnostic programs. "Professional-grade infiltration. We're dealing with someone who knows what they're doing." "The Chen woman?" "Chen's a housewife. This is military or intelligence-level work." Park stood up abruptly. "Check the filing cabinets. See if anything's missing." I pressed myself deeper into the narrow space, barely breathing as the stranger moved toward my hiding spot. His footsteps stopped directly in front of the cabinet I was squeezed behind. "Files have been disturbed," he announced. "Recent access, probably within the last 10 minutes. "She's still here," Park said with deadly certainty. "Building's locked. Down, no way out except past us." He pulled out a weapon, a professional-looking pistol with what appeared to be a silencer. "Find her." The next few minutes passed like hours as the 2 men systematically searched the office. I could hear them moving furniture, opening closets, checking behind curtains. It was only a matter of time before they discovered my hiding place. That's when Elena's voice whispered through my earpiece, "Distraction in 30 seconds. Be ready to move." The building's fire alarm suddenly blared, strobing lights flashing throughout the office. Park and his associate immediately moved toward the windows, looking for signs of fire or emergency responders. "Move now," Elena urged. "Stairwell, go." I slipped out of my hiding place and sprinted for the door, the stolen files clutched against my chest. Behind me, I could hear Park shouting over the alarm. Realizing they'd been outmaneuvered, the stairwell was filled with the sound of my own footsteps and the distant wail of approaching fire trucks. Elena's distraction was thorough and convincing. I reached the ground floor just as the first responders entered the building. "Fire department, everyone out," a firefighter directed, and I joined the stream of people evacuating from adjacent buildings. Elena was waiting 2 blocks away in a nondescript sedan, engine running. I dove into the passenger seat as she pulled away from the curb with practiced casualness. "Did you get it?" she asked. I showed her the download device and the stolen files. "Everything. Financial records, target lists, operational details for the whole network." "And they know someone was there?" "They definitely know. Park is going to be more dangerous now, cornered and desperate." Elena nodded grimly. "Then we'd better move fast. Amanda Reeves' engagement party is tomorrow night, and if we're right about the timeline, it might be her last public appearance." Back at the shipping container safe house, we spread Amanda's file across the metal table like surgeons preparing for a complex operation. The level of detail was terrifying. Daniel had documented Amanda's daily routines, her emotional vulnerabilities, even her sleep patterns. "Look at this," Elena said, pointing to a section marked Elimination Protocol. "They're planning to stage a home invasion during their honeymoon. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." "When's the wedding?" 3 weeks. But according to these notes, they're accelerating the timeline. Something about increased scrutiny requiring immediate action. I stared at the photograph of Amanda's smiling face, remembering how happy I'd been in the early days with Marcus. She had no idea that her fairy tale romance was actually a carefully orchestrated death sentence. "We have to warn her," I said. "Warn her how?" "She won't believe us, and if Daniel realizes she's suspicious, he'll move up the timeline even more." Elena was studying the surveillance photos. "We need a different approach." She pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. "I'm sending Amanda's information to Detective Morrison. Maybe law enforcement can approach this as a routine background check, give Daniel a reason to delay his plans." "What about the engagement party?" Elena's smile was sharp. "Oh, we're definitely going to that party. But not to warn Amanda." She opened her laptop and began pulling up profiles of the network members who would be attending. "We're going to identify every operative in their organization and gather enough evidence to take them all down simultaneously." "How are we supposed to get into an exclusive country club event?" "Leave that to me," Elena replied, already making phone calls in rapid succession. "By tomorrow night, you'll be someone entirely different. Someone with a legitimate reason to be at that party." As Elena orchestrated our infiltration plan, I studied the photos of network operatives who would be gathering in one place. Marcus would be there, along with Victoria, Daniel, and at least 6 other individuals we'd identified as part of the organization. It would be the perfect opportunity to gather intelligence, but it would also be incredibly dangerous. If they recognized me, if they realized that Sarah Morgan had risen from the dead to hunt them, the evening would turn deadly very quickly. But Amanda Reeves deserved better than to die for loving the wrong man. And somewhere in the city, other potential victims were living their normal lives while predators circled closer. Tomorrow night, the dead would walk among the living at a celebration of love that was actually a gathering of killers. And if everything went according to plan, it would be the beginning of the end for Marcus and his entire murderous family business. The transformation began at dawn in an upscale salon that Elena's network had apparently co-opted for clandestine operations. The stylist, a sharp-featured woman named Natasha, worked with the precision of someone accustomed to creating new identities rather than simple makeovers. "Platinum blonde, sharp bob, dramatic makeup," Natasha explained as she mixed chemicals that would strip away my natural brown hair. "You're going to be Vivian Cross, art curator from Manhattan." Divorced, wealthy, looking for investment opportunities. In private collections. The backstory Elena had crafted was intricate enough to withstand casual scrutiny. Vivian Cross existed in databases, had a credit history, even had social media profiles dating back 3 years. The fictional identity was so complete I wondered how many other people Elena's organization had created over the years. The engagement party guest list includes several art collectors, Elena explained as Natasha worked. Vivian received an invitation through a mutual acquaintance who couldn't attend. Perfectly normal for wealthy social circles. For hours later, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The severe blonde bob changed the shape of my face entirely, while expertly applied makeup had altered my features enough that even close friends might not immediately recognize me. The navy cocktail dress Elena provided was expensive enough to belong in the country club's rarefied atmosphere. Remember, Elena said as we reviewed my cover story one final time, you're hunting information, not confronting anyone. Document faces, record conversations, identify network connections. Do not engage directly with Marcus or Victoria. The Riverside Country Club was exactly the kind of place Marcus had always aspired to join, old money elegance with crystal chandeliers and oil paintings of long-dead industrialists. The engagement party was in full swing when I arrived, champagne flowing as guests celebrated Amanda and Daniel's upcoming nuptials. Amanda looked radiant in a cream-colored dress, her face glowing with happiness as she introduced her fiancé to various family members and friends. Daniel played his part perfectly, attentive, charming, just nervous enough to seem genuinely in love. Watching him perform, I understood how easily victims fell into the network's trap. Vivian Cross, I introduced myself to a cluster of guests. Near the bar, activating the recording device hidden in my clutch. I'm so sorry to have missed the formal introductions. Late flight from New York. The conversation was typical cocktail party chatter, but I was scanning faces, matching them against the photographs from Park's office. Within 20 minutes, I'd identified 5 network operatives mingling among legitimate guests. Marcus stood near the outdoor terrace, deep in conversation with 2 men I didn't recognize. Even from across the room, I could see the predatory calculation in his eyes as he surveyed the crowd. Victoria was working the room like a professional politician, charming Amanda's relatives while mentally cataloging their wealth and connections. Vivian, darling. A woman's voice made me turn, and I found myself face to face with someone whose photo I'd seen in Park's files, Rebecca Martinez, listed as a procurement specialist. She was older than her surveillance photos suggested, with surgical enhancements that probably cost more than most people's cars. Rebecca, how wonderful to see you, I replied, praying my improvised familiarity would work. I was just telling the happy couple about your gallery's upcoming auction, Rebecca continued smoothly. Such exquisite pieces. The test was cleverly designed. If I was really Vivian Cross, I would know about my own gallery's events. Fortunately, Elena's preparation was thorough. The Rothschild collection is generating tremendous interest, I replied confidently. Though I suspect the Monet will be the evening's crown jewel. Rebecca's smile widened with approval. Indeed. You must meet Daniel. He's quite the art enthusiast. Before I could object, Rebecca was guiding me toward the happy couple. My heart hammered as we approached Daniel and Amanda, who were posing for photos with Amanda's parents. Daniel, Amanda, I'd like you to meet Vivian Cross, Rebecca announced. She owns that gallery in Manhattan I mentioned. Daniel's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Up close, I could see the family resemblance to Marcus, the same cold intelligence hidden behind warm brown eyes. Congratulations, I said to Amanda, meaning it. You look absolutely radiant. Thank you. Daniel tells me you have some incredible pieces in your collection. Amanda's enthusiasm was genuine, untainted by suspicion. I've always loved Impressionist works. Amanda has exquisite taste, Daniel added, his arm tightening possessively around her waist. I'm hoping to surprise her with something special for our anniversary. The casual mention of a future anniversary made my stomach turn. According to Park's files, Amanda wouldn't live to see their first month of marriage, let alone an anniversary. I'd be happy to show you some pieces privately, I offered, thinking quickly. Perhaps we could arrange a viewing after your honeymoon. That would be wonderful, Amanda replied, but Daniel's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. We'll be traveling extensively after the wedding, he said smoothly. Perhaps later in the year. Of course they'd be traveling. Remote locations, no witnesses, perfect setup for a tragic accident. I was watching Amanda's murder being planned in real time, disguised as honeymoon preparations. Daniel. Marcus's voice cut through the crowd as he approached our group. There you are. I wanted to introduce you to. He stopped mid-sentence when his eyes met mine. For a terrifying moment, I thought he'd recognize me despite the dramatic transformation. But then his expression shifted to polite interest rather than recognition. Marcus, this is Vivian Cross, Daniel said quickly. She owns a gallery in Manhattan. Pleasure, Marcus replied, extending his hand. His grip lingered. A moment too long, his eyes studying my face with uncomfortable intensity. Have we met before? You look familiar. I don't believe so, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. Though I attend quite a few events in the city. Perhaps we've crossed paths at an auction or gallery opening. Perhaps. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. What brings you to our little celebration? Mutual friends, I replied vaguely. I couldn't resist celebrating young love. Victoria appeared at Marcus's side as if summoned, her predatory smile fixed in place. Darling, who's this lovely woman? The introductions were repeated, but I could feel Victoria's assessment of me as both a potential threat and a potential opportunity. Her questions were casual but probing. Where exactly in Manhattan was my gallery, which mutual friends had mentioned the party, how long was I staying in town? You must join us for dinner sometime, Victoria suggested with practiced charm. Marcus. And I love meeting fellow art enthusiasts. That's very kind, I replied, knowing I'd rather eat glass than share a meal with my husband and his accomplice wife. Though I'm returning to New York tomorrow. Such a short visit, Marcus observed. Business or pleasure? Before I could answer, the party's attention shifted to the center of the room where Daniel was tapping his champagne glass with a knife. The crowd quieted as he prepared to give a toast. Friends, family, thank you all for celebrating with Amanda. And me tonight, Daniel began, his arm around Amanda's waist. When I met this incredible woman 8 months ago, I knew my life had changed forever. The crowd murmured appreciatively, but I was studying the faces of the network operatives scattered throughout the room. They watched with the detached interest of professionals observing a colleague's performance. Amanda has brought light into my world, Daniel continued, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. She's taught me what it means to love someone completely, to want to build a future together. Amanda beamed up at him, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. She had no idea she was listening to her own eulogy, delivered by the man planning her murder. So here's to Amanda, Daniel raised his glass, the woman who completed my life and made all my dreams possible. The toast was met with enthusiastic applause, but the words sent chills down my spine. Amanda's death would indeed make Daniel's dreams possible, dreams of financial freedom built on insurance payouts and stolen assets. As the crowd began to disperse, I felt a hand on my arm. Rebecca Martinez was back, her grip firmer than necessary. Vivian, there are some people I'd like you to meet, she said, guiding me toward a quieter corner of the room. Potential clients with very specific needs. The group she led me to included 2 men I recognized from park surveillance photos, network operatives who specialized in what the files had euphemistically called asset recovery. They studied me with professional interest as Rebecca made introductions. Vivian deals in very exclusive pieces, Rebecca explained. Items with complicated provenance. I realized they thought I was a dealer in stolen art, someone who could help them launder assets from their victims. The mistake could be useful if I played it correctly. I'm always interested in unique opportunities, I replied carefully. Though I'm very selective about my clients. Discretion is essential in our line of work, one of the men agreed. Perhaps we could discuss a potential arrangement over dinner. I'm afraid my schedule is quite full, I replied, backing away slowly. But Rebecca has my contact information if something suitable comes up. As I extracted myself from the conversation, I caught sight of Marcus and Victoria in deep discussion with an older man whose face I recognized from the most disturbing section of Park's files. Dr. Michael Harrison, the physician who had signed my death certificate, and several others. They were discussing their next moves, planning future operations while surrounded by innocent people who had no idea they were at a party full of serial killers. I activated my phone's camera and began discreetly photographing the gathering, capturing faces and connections that could prove invaluable. "Excuse me," a voice behind me made me freeze. David Park stood there, his dead eyes fixed on my face with laser intensity. "I don't believe we've been introduced." My blood turned to ice. Park had been hunting me for days, studying my face, analyzing every available photograph. If anyone would see through my disguise, it would be him. "Vivian Cross," I managed, extending my hand with forced confidence. "And you are?" "David Park. Private security." His handshake was a test, his fingers probing for calluses or scars that might identify me. "I handle background checks for some of the family's friends." "How thorough," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "I suppose discretion is important in your line of work." "Very important." Park's eyes never left my face. "Especially when dealing with people who might not be entirely honest about their identities." The threat was barely veiled. He suspected something but wasn't certain enough to act yet. "Well, honesty is so rare in the art world," I replied with a laugh that sounded forced even to my own ears. "Everyone has secrets." "Indeed they do." Park stepped closer, invading my personal space in a way that felt distinctly threatening. "The question is whether those secrets are worth killing for." Before I could respond, Amanda's voice rang out across the room. "Vivian. There you are. I wanted to introduce you to my sister." The interruption was perfectly timed, giving me an excuse to escape Park's interrogation. But as I moved toward Amanda, I could feel his eyes tracking my every movement. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced conversations and careful documentation. I photographed network members, recorded conversations, and gathered intelligence. That would hopefully be enough to expose the entire operation, but as the party wound down and guests began departing, I realized that Park's suspicions had created a new problem. The network knew someone was investigating them, and they would be taking countermeasures. As I walked to my car, I noticed a black sedan following at a discreet distance. Park wasn't taking any chances, he was having me tailed to see where Vivian Cross went after the party. Elena's voice crackled through my earpiece as I pulled into traffic. "You've got a tail. Silver sedan, 2 cars back." "I know." Park suspected something. "Can you lose them?" I thought about the maze of one-way streets in the historic district, the construction zones that had been redirecting traffic for months. "Give me 10 minutes. The chase through the city's narrow streets was like a deadly game of tag. I used every trick I'd learned from action movies, sudden turns, doubled back routes, even abandoning my car in a parking garage and switching to a motorcycle Elena had positioned for emergencies. By the time I reached the safe house, I was reasonably certain I'd lost the surveillance team. But the damage was done. The network knew they were being watched, and they would respond accordingly. "How bad is it?" Elena asked as I collapsed onto the metal chair, adrenaline finally fading. "Bad. They're suspicious, they're organized, and they have resources I didn't expect." I showed her the photos and recordings from the evening. "But we got names, faces, and enough evidence to connect at least 8 operatives to the organization." Elena reviewed the intelligence with professional detachment. "It's good work, but it's also dangerous. They'll be implementing security protocols now, changing communication methods, possibly accelerating their timeline. Which means Amanda is in more danger than before. Which means we need to move to the final phase immediately." Elena's expression was grim. "No more surveillance, no more evidence gathering. It's time to destroy them before they can hurt anyone else." As I prepared for what Elena was calling the final phase, I realized that attending the engagement party had fundamentally changed the stakes. The network knew they were being hunted, and hunters who felt cornered were the most dangerous kind, but Amanda Reeves was still planning her wedding, still believing in her fairy tale romance, still trusting the man who was planning her murder. And somewhere in the city, other potential victims were living their lives in blissful ignorance. The masquerade was over. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The final phase began at 4 a.m. with a coordinated strike that would have impressed military strategists. Elena's network had spent the night positioning assets across the city, preparing to simultaneously hit every known location connected to the murder network. Timing is everything, Elena explained as we reviewed the operation one last time. We have a 30-minute window to gather evidence, secure witnesses, and alert law enforcement before they can destroy records or eliminate loose ends. Detective Morrison sat across from us, no longer retired but officially reinstated for this operation. His connections at the Financial Crimes Commission had finally paid off. They were ready to move on the insurance fraud charges, but they needed our intelligence to make arrests stick. The U.S. Attorney's Office is standing by, Morrison reported. Warrants have been prepared for 8 locations and 12 individuals. But we need Amanda Reeves in protective custody before we move. If they realize the operation is blown, she becomes a liability they'll eliminate immediately. I stared at the surveillance photo of Amanda leaving her apartment for her morning jog, completely unaware that her life hung in the balance. How do we get her to safety without alerting Daniel? Leave that to me, Elena replied, already dialing a number. Amanda's going to receive a very convincing call about a family emergency that requires her immediate attention. While Elena orchestrated Amanda's extraction, I prepared for the most dangerous part of the plan. As Sarah Morgan, legally dead woman, I was going to walk into my old life and confront Marcus face to face. You don't have to do this, Morrison warned. We have enough evidence to prosecute without putting you at risk. This isn't just about prosecution, I replied, checking the recording device Elena had given me. Marcus needs to know that Sarah Morgan didn't just rise from the dead, she came back for justice. The house that had once been my home looked different in the early morning light. Victoria's flowers had replaced mine in the garden, her car sat in the driveway I'd helped design, and her life had been built on the foundation of my supposed death. I used my old key. Marcus had never bothered to change the locks completely, probably assuming a dead woman wouldn't need access. The familiar creak of the front door brought back memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Marcus was in the kitchen, making coffee with the machine I'd bought for our anniversary. He looked older than I remembered, stress lines marking his face as the pressure of maintaining multiple false identities took its toll. Hello, Marcus, I said quietly. He spun around, the coffee mug crashing to the floor as his face went white with shock. For a moment, he looked like he was seeing an actual ghost, which, in every legal sense, he was. Sarah? The word came out. As barely a whisper. But you died, the certificate you filed, I corrected, stepping fully into the kitchen. The death you reported. The insurance money you collected. The life you stole. Marcus's shock was rapidly being replaced by calculation. I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much damage I could do, how quickly he could silence me permanently. I don't understand, he said, playing for time. There was an accident, a car crash. The police said what you told them to say. Just like the doctor who signed my death certificate. Just like the insurance investigator who processed my claim. I pulled out my phone, showing him photos from Park's office. I know about the network, Marcus. All of it. His facade crumbled completely. The loving husband mask fell away, revealing the cold predator underneath. How much do you want? Excuse me? Money. How much to make this go away? Marcus was already moving toward the safe hidden behind our wedding photo. $500,000? $1 million? Name your price. The casual assumption that I could be bought was almost as insulting as the murder plot itself. I don't want your money, Marcus. I want my life back. Your life? He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. You have no life. Sarah Morgan is dead. Legally, officially, permanently dead. You're nothing but a ghost pretending to exist. Then I guess that makes you the man who married a ghost. Victoria's voice came from the doorway. She stood there, in a silk robe, looking perfectly composed despite the circumstances. Unlike Marcus, she didn't seem shocked by my appearance, more like annoyed by an unexpected complication. Victoria, I acknowledged. How lovely to see you again. Though I suppose this is our first meeting, since I've been dead. You should have stayed dead, she replied matter-of-factly. It would have been better for everyone. Better for you, maybe. Not so much for your next victims. Victoria moved to stand beside Marcus, and I could see them calculating their options. 2 against 1, isolated location, dead woman that no one would miss. the math wasn't in my favor. The thing about being legally dead, Victoria continued, conversationally, is that you can't exactly call the police when someone threatens you. After all, how can you harm someone who doesn't exist? Marcus was reaching for something behind the counter, probably a weapon he'd placed there for exactly this kind of emergency. But I had advantages they didn't know about. You're right, I agreed. Dead people can't call the police. I pressed the button Elena had given me, and within seconds the house was surrounded. Not by Elena's people, but by FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, and local police executing the warrants Morrison had arranged. But living people working with law enforcement can. The next few minutes were chaos. Marcus tried to run for the back door, only to find agents waiting. Victoria attempted to destroy documents in the home office, but was stopped before she could eliminate evidence. Both were arrested on charges of insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and actual murder in the case of Jennifer Park. As the handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists, he looked at me with pure hatred. You won't be able to prove you're alive. The system says you're dead, and the system doesn't make mistakes. Actually, Detective Morrison said, appearing in the doorway, the system makes corrections when presented with evidence of fraud. Sarah Morgan's death certificate has been officially voided as of this morning. I felt something shift inside me as he spoke those words. The weight I'd been carrying, the sense of being trapped between life and death, began to lift. Over the next 6 hours, the coordinated raids netted 12 arrests across 4 states. Park's office yielded enough evidence to prosecute the entire network. Dr. Harrison was arrested at his practice. Rebecca Martinez was caught trying to board a flight to a non-extradition country. Amanda Reeves was safe in federal protection. Initially confused about the family emergency that had kept her away from Daniel's apartment when agents arrived to arrest him. Elena's fabricated crisis had literally saved her life. The media coverage was inevitable but carefully managed. The story of a woman who discovered her own death certificate became a cautionary tale about insurance fraud and domestic violence. My real name was kept out of the headlines at Morrison's insistence. I'd been through enough without becoming a public spectacle. 3 months later, I sat in a different coffee shop, reading the final news coverage of the trials. Marcus had received life without parole for multiple counts of murder and conspiracy. Victoria got 25 years for her role as a repeat offender. The network that had killed at least 8 people and destroyed dozens of lives was completely dismantled. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Coffee tomorrow? I have a proposition for you. I smiled, knowing that Elena's propositions usually involved helping other people in impossible situations. My experience as a legally dead woman had given me unique insights into how systems could be manipulated and how victims could be erased from existence. Maybe it was time to use those insights to help others, but first, I had a life to rebuild. The insurance money had been returned, the house was mine again, and my identity was fully restored. I'd even gotten my job back, though my boss admitted he'd been confused when I called to complain about my obituary appearing in the company newsletter. The garden needed work. Victoria's flowers were all wrong for the soil conditions, but I had time now. All the time in the world. My phone rang, an unknown number. For a moment, old fears surfaced. Could there be other network members still out there? But the voice on the other end was young and scared. Is this Sarah Morgan? The woman who came back from the dead? This is Sarah, I confirmed carefully. My name is Jennifer Walsh. I think my husband is trying to kill me, but no one will believe me. I found your name in a news article, and I thought, I hoped maybe you could help. I looked out the coffee shop window at people walking by, living their normal lives, trusting the people they loved. Somewhere in the city, another predator was circling another victim, and the system that was supposed to protect people was failing again. Jennifer, I said, already pulling out a pen to take notes, tell me everything. After all, dead women might not be able to seek justice for themselves, but resurrected ones could damn well make sure others didn't suffer the same fate. The end epilogue. 6 months later, the Sarah Morgan Foundation for Domestic Violence and Financial Fraud opened its doors on a crisp autumn morning. The building was small but efficient, staffed by people who understood what it meant to be erased, discounted, or legally non-existent. Elena had become my unofficial partner, her underground network now operating as a legitimate nonprofit. Detective Morrison served as our law enforcement liaison, and even Dr. Harrison, who had cooperated fully with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence, provided consultation on how medical professionals could be corrupted. We'd helped 17 people in our first 6 months. 17 individuals who had been targeted by various schemes, manipulated by people they trusted, or systematically isolated from support systems. Not all of them had been facing death like I had, but all of them had been facing the erasure of their identities and independence. The Foundation's motto, inscribed on a plaque by the front door, came from my grandmother's favorite saying, "What is buried can bloom again, given proper care and the right conditions."